what's happening is these guys are exploiting these workers in their situation instead of giving you a job. None of these owners want to pay Americans with full wages and benefits. They just don't want to do it. Look at this this is good artwork right here. I like this. Where is it? An analysis of federal and state databases sheds new light on the prevalence and scale of wage theft in New York restaurants and other industries, placing the total wages stolen in one 5-year period at more than $203 million. So next time your boss complains to you about time theft. For Marcelino Zapoteco, I don't know what voice I'm doing, by the way. I'm doing an accent. I don't know which one. Just move on. The final straw came on a quiet night in 2018 at the restaurant Brioso on Staten Island. He was working alongside one of the managers who had pulled in by the restaurant's co-owner, Pietro Peter DiMaggio, to help as a waiter. At one point during the shift, Zapoteco watched the manager slip tip money into his pocket when he was supposed to pull it to be shared with others. Zapoteco, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico, said he knew that the restaurant was grossly underpaying him during the more than 7 years he worked there. When he served as a runner, bringing food to customers' tables, he received as little as $10 for lunch and dinner shifts, far below the required minimum wage, even when tips were included, he said. But that night, when he saw the manager pocketing the tip, Zapoteco had enough. A few days later, he and his co-workers went to DiMaggio and complained, but to no avail. Quote, "If you guys don't like me or don't like Brioso, the door is over there." DiMaggio told them, according to the state investigators report, which included told them according to a state investigators report, which included a transcript of a recording of that conversation. Zapoteco quit and made his way to the offices of the New York State Department of Labor in Manhattan the next day, telling an investigator about what happened. "I explained to her everything that was going on," she said. "Don't worry, we're going to investigate. We're going to help you." Every year in New York State, thousands of workers face predicaments similar to that of Zapoteco's and his former Brioso co-workers. From 2017 through 2021, federal and state investigators found more than 13,000 cases of wage theft, according to an analysis of 2 databases obtained from the U.S. and New York Labor Departments. The databases provided previously unreported details on how much money has been stolen from workers and also shed light on which businesses have committed wage theft. Occasionally, these shit Italian accent. But yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. I don't, for the record, I don't know what accents I'm doing. Just don't ask me to do. There's a few that I've been told I can do. I've been told I can do a Russian accent. I don't know how true that is, or if people are fucking with me. I have no idea how good my British is. Italian, I'm assuming is fine, but I feel like I'm just trying to do a like South American accent and I end up in the Mediterranean. I don't know how that happens, but it is what it is. Database provided previously in all federal and state every year in New. Oh, I already read that already. Okay, cool. In all, federal and state investigators determined during the 5-year period that more than $203 million in wages had been stolen from about 127,000 workers in New York, the analysis shows. The amount of wage theft is almost certainly a significant undercount. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, in 2014, for instance, the agency analyzed census and employment data to compare the reported wages of New York workers against what they should make under local minimum wage. And it estimated that state employers steal up to $1 billion from their workers every year. Federal and state investigators determined that more than $52 million had been stolen from people working in restaurants, more than in any other industry in New York, accounting for more than 25% of all reported wage theft, the analysis shows. Yeah, I can't say that's super shocking, especially in the restaurant industry. You know what the the biggest excuse I hear, like I work in kitchens. I'm a food service worker. And you know what I hear like constantly? The thing that I never, that fucking restaurant owners, managers, any of those people never shut the fuck up about is their goddamn margins. I always got to hear, oh, we're working on thin margins, working on thin margins, working on thin margins. And like, I'm not saying that I think they're lying, but I'm kind of saying I think they're full of shit. Like, because it's every fucking time, every excuse is always our margins are thin. But then, like, you know, they pull up the next week at work and they've got a brand new car or a Tesla or some other like expensive ass, like, you know, a commodity that they've got going that they don't need. And it's always like, you know, same with their house, same with a bunch of other stuff. It's always, you always look and you're like, you say that the margins are thin, but like, you're living a distinctly different life than me. And obviously this isn't for everybody, but when I talk to, as like a one-to-one example, when I talk to my boss when I work on a food truck and they want to tell me about the thin margins, meanwhile, they take 5 months out of the year, every year, and don't work. They've paid off their mortgage in 2 years since starting the business. They're planning on, you know, they're planning on buying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of a car. I think they wanted to get like they wanted to get the Cybertruck or whatever. And I don't know what, I don't believe that's retail yet, but their assumption is that it's worth like $100,000 or something. And they're like, yeah, we're getting that. And we're going to, you know, use it as, was it business expenses? When we all know that business expenses just means, oh yeah, I use it for business, you know, 2 days out of the week and then for home every other day. Or even if it's like, you know, oh, I use it for work all day, but then I also use it for living every single other day. Like, and it's all like, I always notice that. I'm always just like, are the margins thin? And are the margins thin because you're taking too much of too much take home pay? Could that possibly be the reason why? I don't know. Unless it is not intentional. Wage theft was also the problem in the healthcare industry, $28.4 million. Construction, 27.6. Oh, 27.6. Janitorial services and retail stores, 5.9 million. And supermarkets and convenience stores, 5.8 million. Really? Well, I guess supermarkets and convenience stores. I guess that makes sense. But construction, 27. State-to-state comparisons of wage theft are difficult because of how data is collected locally. But an analysis of cases reported to the U.S. Department of Labor and substantiated by federal investigators show that New York ranked 8th highest in the amount of back wages owed per worker. Yeah, that makes sense. You're going to see a lot of this, by the way, in the in cities, just because that's a lot of people living there. That, you know, in cities, that's also why the what's it called? Fuck, what am I thinking? Is that what it was? Oh, I guess healthcare industry is worse. No, wait. 52 million stolen from people working restaurants. Oh yeah, that's also why restaurants is the worst of all those. That's what it was. Just because you have so many restaurants packed into cities. Advocates say that the federal and state agencies are failing to stamp out wage theft and that they have little faith in the agency's ability to protect workers' livelihoods. Wage theft is not taken seriously as a crime by the system. It's not by the New York State law enforcement groups or the elected leaders of our state. Oh my goodness, said Joanne Loom, executive director of the National Mobilization Against Sweatshops and New York-based workers' rights organization. That's a fucking mouthful. How are working people who are working so hard expected to survive if it's okay to have their wages stolen? And also, again, keep in mind, there's a reason why, you know, the healthcare industry, construction, I don't know about, well, retail stores, certainly, but there's also a reason why, those industries get away with this. And it's because, and say it with me now, they all donate to super PACs, which fund campaigns. You don't donate to campaigns in a relevant enough capacity, you can't. You and I can only donate, what I think the limit is $2,500 to any political campaign. Walmart, your local hospital, a bunch of the restaurant owners who come together under I forget what fucking group it is. There's like a lobbying group for like restaurant owners. They all pool together their money and then hand that over to campaigns. so that they can, so that they'll listen to their issues and listen to their perspective on stuff. Meanwhile, our perspective doesn't get heard. Nobody hears me saying this, but Brandon don't come to me for this kind of stuff. Joe doesn't call me. As much as I'm a, I'm a Biden guy over here. I'm not a, I'm not a Trump guy over here. But like, Joe don't call me and ask me, hey Josh, how's the kitchens doing? I don't know what voice. I feel like I'm doing New York, some New York guy. I don't know if that's Joe Biden. He's from fucking Delaware. I don't know how to do his voice. But like, he doesn't call me and go, why am I doing a fucking whatever? No, how's the restaurant industry? Are they treating you well? And I go, no, of course they're not. We're getting like shit hours, shit pay, busting our asses, breaking our backs. My wrist is destroyed from flipping a million burgers and making a million pizzas. I'm constantly around dangerous chemicals, everything else in between. He doesn't do that. He gets into contact with the restaurant owners lobbying group, and they tell him, hey, our workers are kind of being a pain in the ass. Could you guys, just not pass a higher minimum wage because everything else. Yeah, it's just. They don't take my calls. Italian American. Is he? He might be. Why, man? All of my voices just go to Italians. I don't know why that is. I feel like that was distinctly different though from the other. I feel like that Italian was like, fucking Super Mario in like in Brooklyn sort of Italian, not whatever, not like Italian in the Mediterranean. I've only met a few. Actually, no, that's a lie. That's a lie. I have met a couple Italians from the Mediterranean. Shush. Good God. Advocates say at the federal state agencies, yeah, we know. Wait stuff is not taken seriously. Okay, yeah, we go. Hildelyn Colon Hernandez. Good God. Colon Hernandez, Deputy Director of New Immigrant Community Empowerment. God, can we stop with all these group names that are like a bajillion the words long, please? A New York-based worker advocacy organization said, why can't we just have like better life for workers, or can we just have that New Immigrant Community Empower? Oh, Jesus Christ. And said employers, quote, employers are operating with no consequences. One of the reasons, she said, is that the federal and state agencies haven't fully adapted to the changing business landscape, with technology and the so-called gig economy complicating the employer-employee relationship. That makes wage theft even harder to address. Colon Hernandez added that her organization now trains its employees on how to investigate wage theft because it would take too long if they had to rely on federal and state investigators to recover back wages. The U.S. Department of Labor did not respond to requests for comment. Aaron Cagwin, whatever, spokesperson of the State Department of Labor, highlighted his agency's work with the Wage Theft Task Force, a collaboration with the State Attorney General's Office and other law enforcement agencies that began in 2015. Last year, Governor Kathy Hochul announced that the task force had secured felony convictions of 9 employers for a variety of charges, from defrauding the New York State Insurance Fund to falsifying business records and failing to pay wages. 9. Not 9,000, not 9% of the people who do this. 9. Flat 9. Jesus Christ. What did they find? 127,000 workers? Like, Jesus. Cagwin said his agency uses, quote, every resource available to protect New Yorkers, ensure workers are paid that they're owed, and hold bad actors accountable. You could have gotten those 9 workers from like one fucking restaurant. It's like, yeah, we found, yeah, like, oh my God. Or no, sorry, it was 9 people got convicted. So it's, yeah, 9 total restaurants. Wow. That's like a quarter block in New York City. Let's see. Frank, what is it? Okay. Frank A. Oswald, a lawyer for the owners of Brioso, said his clients disputed the wage theft allegations made by Zapateco and other former workers. He noted that the owners eventually agreed to settle the civil lawsuit that the former workers filed against them, and that was because of the Chapter 11 bankruptcy that the restaurant filed, quote, due to exorbitant costs of the wage litigation in the district court that threatened to put the restaurant out of business. Okay, so let's be really clear here. They agreed to settle to give them wages that they stole because the litigation was the cost of the litigation was too exorbitant. So they declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and now all of their debts are dispersed. And now what? The owners of that restaurant can go, you know what happens to them? They become workers again. But none of their restaurants gone. Okay. Their like business is gone. Okay. But none of their funds are touched, meaning they get to keep everything else because of all of this. It's fucking ridiculous. In 2018, and what's worse is they could have not disputed it, paid the settlement and called it a day, but they wanted to fight it. Idiots. In 2018, the lawyer representing the Briosos owners at the time also wrote to a state investigator claiming that Zapateco quit his job not because of wage theft, but because of a disagreement over payment method. Real difference there. Zapateco, the lawyer wrote, insisted on being paid in cash instead of through an automatic payroll system. Zapateco denied the allegation. Why would he need to get paid cash? He can get paid through a normal payroll system. That's not, Zapateco moved to New York City from the Mexican state of Guerrero in 2009 in search of work and education opportunities. A year later, he began working at Brioso after a cousin who had been living in the city told him about the job. Zapateco became a busser, taking dirty plates to the kitchen. He was soon promoted to runner. Wow. After a worker in that role quit. Throughout his time in the restaurant, Zapateco said he experienced wage theft. Carlos Ortiz, a state investigator assigned to the case, detailed in reports obtained by Documents and ProPublica a number of ways DiMaggio stole money from his workers. DiMaggio deducted 5% of their tips, quote, supposedly to pay for the computer system. Oh, yes, I've heard of this. Yeah, so you might see some of this sometime in small businesses where they'll take a little bit off the top of like your wage or the top of your maybe like your tip pool or whatever to go toward it's kind of like the equivalent of you using okay, you know what it's similar to? It's similar to how when you buy a concert ticket on the internet through Ticketmaster, there's like the ticket price, and then there's like the convenience fee. And that's what these guys are charging. They're charging a convenience fee for you to be paid in some weird particular way. Even though like paying for a computer system isn't a extra cost associated with like somebody's pay, like that's a business cost. If you buy a computer, you pay for internet through your like at your business, you most likely are writing that bill off every single year in taxes. So like the fact that they're taking it through this system through like a different means that they're already writing off that computer system through taxes. I mean, they're getting all the money to do that as an expense, and then they're pocketing the extra 5% every time. And sometimes took more in certain circumstances, such as when customers complain about their food, a form of wage theft under New York law. Ortiz also found that DiMaggio made some workers buy uniforms and pay for broken plates, another form of wage theft. Again, if you have a uniform, a lot of restaurants usually don't require a uniform. The only thing they'll ask you to wear is like specific colors. So, you know, for us at like most restaurants I've worked at, usually it's black. Usually they're like, just wear like a black shirt. Wear, they need to be pants. You need to wear non-slips. And they'll usually just buy aprons. They usually just buy like, you can get a service that'll bring you aprons every single week, like clean ones. So the only thing that they'll require you to do is wear the apron, right? And since they already provide that one's pretty easy. But there are places that will say, oh, you need to wear a uniform for this or this. but then try not to pay you for that uniform, even though that technically is supposed to be an expense by the business. If there is a uniform, you are to provide it because it is a requirement to the job and it's something that you're supposed to invest in. Same goes for what was the other one that they just listed? The uniforms pay for broken plates. Yeah, same with broken plates. If you have broken plates, which absolutely happens in restaurants, that's not your workers' responsibility to replace. That is supposed to come out of the business's funds. That is a business expense. But again, they're going to do that. They're going to buy the plates, write it off as a business expense, but they're going to charge workers so that they don't have to incur that, or it doesn't have to come out of the owner's actual take-home pay. That's also the thing that they want to avoid. Labor experts say wage theft is prevalent in the restaurant industry because its workforce is heavily made up of undocumented immigrants. Also a good reason why we should offer these people citizenship, who are less willing to speak up because of their status. More than 60% of restaurant workers living in New York City are immigrants, according to a 2020 study at the New York State Comptroller's Office. Of the 800,000 workers in the industry, 44% were Hispanic and 20% were Asian, the study found. At Brioso, Ortiz found that the workers' immigration status left them exposed. When one employee complained about stolen tips, for instance, DiMaggio responded by threatening to report the employee to the immigration authorities, slamming tables, and then firing them. So this is also like when people talk about the effect that immigrants have on the workforce. This is the effect. This is what they get to live through, because guys like this DiMaggio character doesn't want to hire American workers who by law have to make a certain wage, and people who you can't unfairly coerce to work for poor wages and be threatened with immigration action. Essentially, these bosses go, look, I'm going to hire a bunch of illegal workers. They're all going to work for me for shit wages. And if any of them get uppity, I'm going to threaten to kick them out of the country. That's how this works. That is like, who is like, and Americans will turn around and go and blame immigrants and blame like people who come to this country for that relationship, for taking our jobs. You've heard the old, like, I am sure you've heard they took our jobs. The immigrants were taking our jobs. No, what's happening is these guys are fucking exploiting these workers and their situation instead of giving you a job. None of these owners want to pay Americans with full wages and benefits. They just don't want to do it. They would prefer to hire illegal immigrants or immigrants in general, who that they can then threaten with their immigration status, so that they can keep their wages low, so they can keep so they themselves can take home higher wages every single week. That's the entire reason. It's the entire reason we have the problem we have. And people say like, oh, well, if we just got rid of the immigrants, go look at Florida. You get rid of, if you mandate that all of these companies, all of these the business owners, if you mandate all of them, none of them can use illegal immigrants anymore. You know what they're going to do? They're going to run into shortages, and they're going to rely on what little staff they have left that's legal to keep the train running as best as it can. Because again, at the end of the day, they don't want American workers. They don't want to have to pay benefits. So this is what you do. This is what you do. This is what you do. You make the immigration process rather simple. You make the penalties for, being undocumented just a little bit less intense. You make the relationship not nearly as predatory as it currently is. And, when those people were able to get citizenship, I'd be fine with just giving all legal immigrants in this country citizenship. I got really no problem with that. All you do is do that, and guess what? Overnight, all of those workers are now legalized. Every single one of those business owners now has to pay all their workers. You have now equalized every worker in the country. You don't have this second tier of under the table labor. That's how you actually compound some of this. And obviously, in the meantime, since that's not going to happen, I understand that that's not realistic and that's rather simplistic. But what we can do in the meantime, the realistic thing you do, is you just come down hard on these people. You just tell them you need to pay proper wages. If we catch you doing this shit, Litigation is going to be the least of your problems. And like, when the consequences don't outweigh the risks, they're not consequences. And the consequences of you using illegal labor, of abusing that legal labor, are unexistent. Let's see. Mr. DiMaggio would make statements to the Hispanic employees such as, quote, "I'll personally make sure that you all get sent back to Mexico." Or, "Thank God that Trump is doing everything possible." Yeah, and you can tell who these people vote for. Everything possible to get you guys the fuck out of here. Keep in mind, like, what's hilarious about this guy resents these people. Like, oh, I want you to leave even though my business relies on your incredibly cheap labor. In New York, the state's minimum wage rules can also work against restaurant employees. The normal wage is $14.20 to $15 an hour, but it's $9.45 to $10 for food service workers. That should not be different, by the way. There absolutely should not be state mandated differences in this kind of way. With the requirement for their employers to make up the rest if tips don't cover the difference. This creates a complex system that makes it easy to exploit workers, said Teofilo Reyes, Chief Program Officer for Restaurant Opportunity Center United, a national organization advocating for better pay. Oh my God, Jesus, all of these with the long names. Elizabeth Jones, co-legal director at Make the Road New York, an immigrant rights organization, said the wage theft is essentially, quote, the business model for restaurants. It is. Some places are exploring banning the two-tiered minimum wage system entirely. That would also solve a lot of the problems. DC, for instance, voted in November to phase out the system by 2027, but no similar measures have been. Oh yeah, DC's another big one. DC's a huge fucking immigrant hub. Like, so many Ethiopians, so many Chinese immigrants. It's great, amazing food, but yeah, like, it's pretty bad. Like restaurant employees, experts say construction workers in New York often experience wage theft, given that the industry also employs a high number of undocumented immigrants. About 1,600 construction companies, including ones that specialize in carpentry, electrical work, and iron work, as well as general contractors, were found to have stolen wages from more than 7,700 New York workers from 2017 through 2021, the analysis shows. Healthcare workers, including nurses and employees at hospitals and nursing homes, faced about as much wage theft as construction workers, the analysis shows. Loom, the national mobilization against sweatshops, said the unique working conditions for many healthcare workers make them vulnerable to wage theft. For instance, home healthcare aides who had the highest amount of wage theft found by federal and state investigators among all professions in the industry often had to work 24-hour shifts, but are not paid for breaks built into the schedule for eating and sleeping. Loom said this payment structure rarely reflects the reality that patients need care at odd hours of the night, meaning workers are on call continuously. When they try to report that they don't sleep, then they're ignored and retaliated against or even punished. Some members of the National Mobilization Against Sweatshops were involved in arbitration claims filed in 2019 against 42 home health care companies, alleging that they underpaid more than 100,000 workers in New York. In February, an arbitrator awarded a $30 million fund paid for by the companies to compensate the workers. And again, it's always like, all right, it was worth $30 million. How much did they get out of that? If it doesn't outweigh it, it's not a consequence. Some workers are unhappy with the outcome and say that they are owed as much as $6 billion. Loom said that the arbitrator's ruling amounts to a slap on the wrist for the companies. It sends a message to the employers that you can continue doing what you're doing. Let's see. Oh yes, the classic threaten immigrants so they stop talking trick. Oh yeah, it's in Pokemon terms super effective. Trade unions would come in handy. Absolutely. And yeah, like, more unionization would also help with this. Nova also makes a really good point. That's like probably if we're talking about the longest term solution to this, unionization is going to be it. Because you don't want to see your fellow worker. Like, if you're already working in a place that's unionized, you don't want your work undermined by, somebody who might be undocumented, but you also like work with that person, and you probably don't want to see their life be so complicated doing the same work you do. So just that camaraderie and solidarity, I think. Also, unions show there's an argument that unions also reduce racism. So there's also that, because when you're working around people of different ethnic groups and different backgrounds, you tend to kind of assimilate with them, and you see them not as some illegal immigrant who's taking our jobs, and more just as your coworker. In September 2018, 7 months after Zapateco quit his job and went to the New York State Department of Labor, the agency's investigators visited the restaurant and interviewed several workers. Several months later, as the investigation continued, the Brioso employee called Ortiz, complaining that he and his co-workers had been subjected to retaliatory actions by DiMaggio. The employee, quote, alleges that Mr. DiMaggio has always yelled at and intimidated the employees, but has become more aggressive since the department's visit. The agency eventually reached out to make the road New York to see if it could help protect the workers. Jordan said Make the Road took the case after learning that it was, quote, one of the worst cases in terms of conditions that we've seen. Okay, criminal convictions for wage theft are rare, but the district attorney's office initially expressed interest in pursuing the case. District attorney's office interviewed several Brioso workers. Okay. Meanwhile, concurrently with the criminal investigation by the department attorney's office, the Department of Labor investigators were still working to recover back wages from Brioso, but Zapateco and his former co-workers had heard nothing from them. With the case dragging on, Make the Road lawyers and a pro bono partner asked the agency to close the case so that the findings from the investigation could be shared with them. And using the federal civil lawsuit they were planning to file on behalf of the workers, they filed the lawsuit in December of 2020, demanding more than $12 million. Jesus. During the lawsuit discovery process, lawyers found that Brioso had two previous wage theft claims against it, one from a decade earlier in which the agency ordered Brioso to pay a worker more than $12,000, and another from 2017 that had settled for $75,000. Jesus. And again, this is how much, this is the thin margins group. In November, the owners of Brioso agreed to settle the lawsuit with Zapateco and 11 others for $700,000, with roughly a third of it covering the lawyer's fees. In May, roughly 5 years after he went to New York State Department of Labor, Zapateco received his payment for Brioso, but he said that he was frustrated with the experience of working with the agency, saying it, quote, it doesn't work well because it took so long. We were waiting forever. Zapateco said neither the agency nor the district attorney's office was able to hold DiMaggio accountable for what he did. I wanted him to fix the way he was doing things, he said. So yeah, and like, this is the thing, right? There's this group that's like trying to help out. The Department of Labor takes forever, and this is what owners are betting on, that you don't have the resources or time to actually bring forth litigation and win your case, because kind of like the same way that those Hollywood producers, the same way that they look at the writers. If you saw like early on in the writer strike here in the U.S., there was a quote from some unnamed producer, or the I don't remember what the acronym is, but for the producers group, in which they said, we're gonna wait out the strike until writers start losing their homes, start their finances just start falling apart, and then they'll have to come to the table and accept a deal that's more in our favor. And that is your and my relationship with every single one of these owners. I guess I don't want to be too mean. Not every single, just a vast majority, because they don't have the same incentive structure we do. We sell our labor every single day for enough pay to keep our lives intact, to keep to be able to continue to pay for our rent, continue to pay maybe our mortgage if we're lucky, continue to pay for food, continue to pay for entertainment that keeps us from the just dying of depression or whatever. We sell our labor so that we can live decent lives, not to live some kind of extravagant lifestyle, just to live decently. And owners on the other hand, they don't live that way. The guys who own this restaurant, people who own Walmart, any of these retail stores, any of it, they don't sell their labor for a better life. They take a piece of the value you create through your labor, and they then and they own that. They take all of it, they sell it, and they give you a little piece back. And they get to decide how big your piece is and how big their piece is. And what do you think when you have that ability to make that decision and nobody is there to challenge you? What do you think you're going to pick? I think it's rather obvious that when you build up a system where one person is at the top, unchallenged, unfazed, unquestioned, unbothered by the mass number of people who create the wealth that they oversee, it's naturally what you're going to see. You're going to see abuses. And these abuses aren't just like one or two things here. These sorts of abuses are far reaching. How many families had to go through financial strife because this DiMaggio guy wanted to hold on to just a little bit more of their surplus value, of the value that they created through their labor? How many families, what is it, 11 other people? 11 families this person was able to affect in a negative way, almost assuredly. And this is the system of capitalism. It empowers the few to lord over the many. Well, I think you're some sort of Marxist. You know, you'd be shocked, Nova. What's funny is, you know, it's just, I mean, like, I don't even know how much of this, because I've only really like delved into a bit of Marx's writing. I haven't read theory. I'm not a big theory person. My dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD kind of incentivizes me to not bother trying to read something as wordy as the Communist Manifesto, amongst other things. But it's just like, I feel like this is all stuff that we all have experienced. We all can kind of understand. Like, I don't think I'm saying anything crazy here. We understand, like, conservatives understand, or at the very least, they have this, I think, innate distrust. No, I can't even say that. No, I can't even say that. I was going to say the federal government, but like their federal government thing is all convenient for them, because it's only the federal government's a problem for them when it's not them in power. So no, I can't even say that. Yeah, I don't know. It's just none of this is I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't personally think it matters if it's Marxist. It's certainly probably a bit socialist, I'm sure. But like, and even then, I don't really know if it matters. It's just if any of this makes sense. If you hear this as a conservative and you think, but the person who started the business took the risk by starting the business, and yeah, okay, they took the risk. Nobody's saying that they didn't, but again, like, what's the risk? And no, seriously, like that's something also that people kind of forget. What's the risk? The risk is, if your business fails, you know what happens? You're one of us again. You're just a worker. Like the worst thing these guys can become, if their business fails, if they fail as an owner, is a worker. That's worst case scenario for them. They're back to being one of us. And that's where I think, because I've had really stern arguments with bosses before, and of smaller businesses. And that's what I think the thing is that like bugs them the most. They don't want to be told anymore what to do, how to do it. They don't want a boss anymore. But like, it's not something that they don't want for society. It's just something they don't want for themselves. They just want to be the person to be cracking the whip. They're not against, they don't see a problem with the predatory authoritarian nature of the employer-employee relationship as it stands right now. They just have a problem with it being them on the receiving end. I don't know, maybe it's because they're too scared too selfish to work with other workers and try to make it better for all of us? Because if being a worker was better for everybody, your risk to start a business isn't nearly as precarious. More people would probably end up doing so, I predict. But, to them, to most owners, they're there. The system worked for them. They're already up there. They don't need a reform. They just need everyone to shut the fuck up, stop complaining, and do what I say. That's what they need. Good bit of it. Yeah, I definitely think to be a boss, you need to be a bit narcissistic. The thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.